This is the Analog Gamers Podcast with your hosts.
I'm Shane.
And I'm Brent.
I'm Frank.
So we're talking about party games, and I really enjoy party games, but the other two here don't really enjoy party games. So we're going to spend some time talking about party games and what we do or don't like about them. You know, what some of our favorites or not favorites are. So first, one of the things we were talking about is what games qualify as party games. And I guess part of it is how big our parties are.
So,
Yeah, boy, that could make a statement.
no, that's a really good point, because what's the difference between a board game, a large group board game, and a party game? I mean, is it the number of players? If you got a board game like Codenames, which is readily available, so some of you listeners may have seen it if not played it, is that it goes up to, you could go pretty large with it, but I think it's listed at up to 10 players. At that group, is it a party?
Yeah, I guess. How fun are the people that are coming?
Well,
yeah, so I think that's really important because, you know, so when we think of party games, traditionally think of games like Taboo, Scattergories, you know, even like Trivial Pursuit is obviously a trivia game, but I've never played that's not, you know, at a kind of party, more of a social thing. I know, Frank,
so you
have a
in
different
teams?
experience. Yeah, so like teams of 3 or 4 in that game. So even for me, I guess in my mind, in my experience, even that for me has been categorized in that nature.
So I'll have to. So this is where Shane's right. I don't really enjoy party games that much, but the flip side of that is when I play Trivial Pursuit, it is much more fun with teams of people than as individuals. I've played it both ways. As individuals, it drives me nuts because there are a couple of areas. I'm an engineer, so science, I can hit that one pretty good. Literature, yeah, I'm pretty much going to be awful at that one. And so it's very spotty what I can do. And they end up with 4 people playing around a board who don't know one category. And so they can't finish the game because they don't know one category.
So for me, I don't know. I really categorize party games not only as the number of people that play, though, but also how simple it is. Can you pull out the box, open it up, and everyone's going to know how to play immediately. There's no strategy involved. They don't have to really think about what they're doing. They're just going to know what the game is and how to play it. And I think that's what's missing for me when I play them is I don't have to think when I'm doing it. I just kind of play.
That's true. Sitting here thinking of party games too, I think a lot of them are word association games. So, not to say that, you know, the two of you don't know words, but that's not particularly, as you said in Trivial Pursuit, that's not particularly what you enjoy anyway.
Right. So is Twister a party game?
Yes.
It's a game you play at parties.
That's true. It'd be hard to get that on the table, but
certainly isn't a word game.
Yeah. That's definitely true. All right, so what are some of your experiences with party games?
I'm going to toss one more thing in.
Okay.
I think a lot, maybe not all, but a lot of party games are aimed at getting laughs.
That's
idea is to create a social interaction where it's funny. I don't know if that's part of the definition though. Maybe not.
So when we get together, we pretty much never play party games because we enjoy the heavier games. But what are some circumstances that you guys have found yourselves in where you're kind of forced into playing party games or have played party games?
So my wife loves them. She enjoys them all the time. So whenever we have more than 3 or 4 people over who haven't played games, that's generally what she'll go to first. She'll go to some kind of game that we can pull out and just say, here, let's enjoy this.
So what are some of the ones that you guys have that she pulls out?
So we've played Cranium several times. Don't really enjoy it, but she enjoys it, so that's what matters. I'd have to think what's on the shelf there. What else we play?
Gotcha. Yeah, what about you, Frank?
We have a very good friend who actually extracted from me a promise that I will play Wits and Wagers from him every year at Christmas. It's his Christmas present. So I get one game of that in. There are a few others. I guess I have in the past. The first time I played Taboo, which was years ago, I really did enjoy that. We split into 2 teams. I think it might have even been guys against girls. And went around, and we were playing that with, I bet you there were probably 15, at least over a dozen people at the table. And it worked really well. Other than that, I guess I could probably skip a lot of party games. I would actually, a lot of times, rather sit out and watch people play, make snide remarks, maybe,
Yeah.
than actually be in the game myself.
Yeah, for me, I mostly these days play party games in two areas. Either one when I go home and visit my parents, because that's kind of where they are, and that's a lot of the games I grew up playing was party games. Or at work, right? So I work with teenagers, so a lot of times, kind of those party-ish type games, even like Mafia, Werewolf, are games that we play with them, just to kind of get them interacting. And so I think you're right? So I use it a lot as a tool at work for social interaction.
So an icebreaker kind of thing?
Yeah, so it's a lot less about the game itself and more about the people there.
Werewolf is an icebreaker. That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, get them in and have werewolves attack them right away. And
by the time we're done, we know who lies well.
Right. Do you guys think party games work better with people you know well or people you don't know? Because I feel like a lot of times when I play party games, they go a lot smoother when I know the people, because we kind of have an inside language or established relationship that we can refer to. So what is your guys' experience? Do you think it goes better? Do you think it's better for people that you don't know or people that you do know really well?
I really think the games work better with people we do know because most of them are about your relationship. They're not necessarily about the game. Now, that being said, I think they work great for people who you don't know only because there's something accessible. Generally, if you look at a Trivia Pursuit, or the one that does come up for us that's halfway decent is the Logo board game, almost everybody knows brands.
Yeah.
So it's something they're going to know, and they don't necessarily need to know you. So I think it depends on the game there.
So the other advantage of the Logo game is, and this is, so I'll tie this back to your question. The Logo game doesn't require you to act or draw or do anything else that involves some kind of talent. Sing, and those kinds of games typically drive me nuts because I'm not good at any of those things. And in a group where I don't know people, I would probably hold back. In a group, if our gaming group, since we've been together for years, if we pulled out a party game, once I got past the twitching, I would probably be fine doing things that would be normally embarrassing with you guys because I've known you guys so long and we're such good friends. But that's not true if I was in a new group. So some of that depends on the game.
Yeah, and I think, especially when I think of somebody like my wife who's really introverted, she wouldn't, you said some level of talent. I think she would probably view it as some level of vulnerability to put herself out there and have to sing or draw, and she wouldn't necessarily be into that. Or even a game like Werewolf, a lot of that is bluffing and interaction and accusations. And for her, I've actually played with her, and for the most part, she just kind of hangs out and watches everybody play the game until she's killed off. But then I think of a game...
Wow. Go ahead. I can picture that.
But then I think of a game like Dixit, right? Would you guys consider Dixit a party game?
I would. Not because it fits... Mainly because it fits into that category of games that has rather simple and loose rules.
Right.
Which gets back to part of the reason I don't care for them is so often the rules are written loosely. We'll hit that. Where were you going with this?
Well, I think Dixit is a type of party game that you almost have to play with people because so in Dixit, right, you have cards that have different artwork and pictures on it. You pick one, you give a clue. Everybody gives a card that they think others might think pertain to that clue, and then you vote on which you think is the original card. But if you don't know people very well, and you're giving these clues that you think are fantastic, but nobody knows what the heck you're talking about, the game's not going to go very well.
So it's like apples to apples with pictures.
Yeah. It's pretty similar.
Except that there's a definitive way to get to the end.
Okay.
Correct. And so, if I'm giving these abstract clues that I don't know people very well, they may not know. Now, the advantage might be, if it's my wife and I in a group of people we don't know very well, we can definitely manipulate it because we can give clues that we know, but nobody else around the table is going to know.
So what you're saying, manipulate it as in we can do better and have a better chance of winning.
Yeah, well,
so it's the
I guess manipulate the relationships, for the purpose of the game.
For the purpose of winning?
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that strikes me about party games is that often you are not playing to win, You're playing for the experience. It's an experience game.
I guess I'm just too competitive. I want to win.
So do I, which is, but it has a different result. That results in you trying to win a party game. That results in me going, can we play something else?
And everybody else going, he's taking this way too seriously.
I don't know. We're usually
probably
drinking
true.
by the time we're playing these, so I don't necessarily care anymore.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, so, I mean, that gets back to, I think, my biggest issue with these is the rules are often loose, and so I don't feel like it's a winnable situation. Headbands is the one that comes to mind. You're playing headbands, you have a card up there, it's got who or what or where, some kind of noun on it. People are giving you hints, you're supposed to guess, you go around the room, everybody's got one of these on, you go around, you're supposed to be able to guess it. So, first of all, the two things that I have a problem with is, if you have something like Ebenezer Scrooge, is that a person, or is that a thing, because Ebenezer Scrooge is a fictional character? And the flip side of that is, what's a valid... I mean, some people will give clues so obscure that they're not really a clue. Right. Oh, yeah, it is. But some people won't. Some people will give things so it gets to the point where some debate about what's valid, what's not. And I won't say never, I rarely end up in a case where there's not some discussion over rules or is that legitimate, whatever. That discussion enters into almost every game. Yes, people are laughing, but there seems to be these unclear areas that kind of drive me nuts.
Right, and the rules in that game, right, you're supposed to ask a yes or no question to try and figure out who or what you are. And the rules say you can say yes, no, or maybe. But I feel like anytime I've played that game, a lot more answers are coming out because, a lot of times we'll say it's complicated.
Yeah.
Or kind of.
Yeah.
And those answers really aren't helpful. And I think, too, with that game, it's really fun, but you get to a certain point where one or two people just cannot figure out who they are, and so it just gets super frustrating for them. And so I think that's another difficult thing about party games is there often seems to be one or two people who just are not as good as everybody else, and the experience is just completely ruined for them because they can't even operate within the simplicity of that game.
So what's your win type condition in that game?
So I think my win condition, I think you almost have to stop playing, which kind of really sucks. But, right, as we kind of said, if the goal of the game is to have a good time and form relationships, more so than, winning based on the win conditions of the game, I think at some point you almost have to either change the game to make it more fun or end the game before it gets to the point where people are getting frustrated.
So in my mind, if you end the game at that point, it's not a game, it's an activity.
Right.
So, and we can get into that discussion maybe at some point in time of what makes a game a game. That almost gets to, I can bore myself with that topic. But the other thing you said, the other thing you said was you have to change the game. So, Trivial Pursuit, the way to have fun with that, in my mind, is to change the game and not make it an individual game, make it a team game. That's how you change that. Headbands, we've all kind of, what I'm hearing is none of us that would not be the game we would go to first if we were doing a party game.
It's really fun for the first 15 minutes, I think. So if you cap it,
okay,
I think it's good.
So
don't have any win condition at all. Just stop after 15 minutes.
I mean, I guess in that circumstance, the win condition would simply be who's guessed the most cards correctly in the amount of time we've given. Rather than reaching a certain amount of correct guesses, just saying we're going to play for 20 minutes, whoever has the most guesses right wins. So kind of switching the win condition from, right, you have to get 5 of them or however many it is to we're going to play for this amount of time, whoever has the most wins. And I think for me, that's a really easy, good change with party games to say, here's how long we're going to play. Whoever has the most within this amount of time wins. Because that works for things like taboos, categories, that type of game.
Yeah, that would work. So I'm going to ask this question. Is a game like Codenames or The Resistance that can go up to 10 is not really there to make people laugh.
Right.
Does have a fairly tight rule set. Is that a party game?
I think so, simply because it seems to be a very different type of game than something like a Catan or a Ticket to Ride, that would probably be another introductory game. right? So the interactions and the relationship in a game like Codenames is super important because you're giving clues, trying to get them to guess something. So it's almost a completely different type of interaction between people than a game like Catan or Ticket to Ride. So for me, I think, yeah, especially the Resistance, because, I mean, that's pure relationship. You're trying to figure out what your relationship to other players is within the context of the game.
So for those of you who have not played these, very, very brief overview. Codenames, you have code makers. I can't remember exactly what they're called, but you have an individual for each team. There's 2 teams, and they are giving clues to get people to guess words. But the problem is you can inadvertently have the other team guess their words because of things that are going on.
Yeah, so there's a grid of words on the table.
Right.
And everybody's using that same grid. So everybody's trying to guess from the same pool of words. Right.
And then the other one is the Resistance. You again have 2 teams. You have good guys and bad guys. I tend to think of it in terms of the Galactic Empire against the Rebels in Star Wars. The Rebels have a resistance movement, but the Galactic Empire has infiltrated it, and you're trying to the Rebels are trying to complete mission. The Empire is trying to stop them. They're not called those things in the game, by the way. But nobody really knows who each other are. There are a few caveats to that, but for the purpose of this, it's not worth going into. Both are really fun. Are those party games to you, Brent?
So in my mind, Codenames is because it's based on the relationship that you have with the people. The clues you give are completely based on what you know that person might know. So if you don't know the people around the table, you're going to have to give more generic clues than if you know the person sitting across from you that you're playing with. Resistance, in my mind, isn't, because it has a very set rule. I mean, you are stuck in a role, and you know what that role is, and you know what your goal for that role is.
But isn't the social interaction just as important in that?
I think it often goes too far. So you have to be able to tell whether someone's lying or not, or be able to deduce that from some other context clue that's out there. But I don't think that's necessarily something that you have to know the social or even the relationship to do, because being able to tell if someone's lying is its own skill, as poker people will tell you all the time. Being able to tell if someone's bluffing isn't necessarily about your relationship with them as much as you're being able to read people in general.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
So would you say like Mafia or Werewolf is a party game? Because for me, Mafia and Werewolf are a very similar type of game to the Resistance. The Resistance just gives a little more structure.
I think they border a line. You can play it fairly easily, but I don't know that I would I don't know where I would classify those.
Okay. So I do think there's a distinction between party games and large group board games.
Right.
That's not typically recognized, but in my mind that exists.
So what are some examples of large group board games and then party games so we can kind of see where that line is?
So I would definitely put the Resistance, even Codenames, and Werewolf, any of those social deduction games into, and they tend to all be social deduction games, by and large, into a large group board game grouping. And the reason for that is because the rules typically are more tightly written. No, if I'm honest, probably the real reason is because I like those games, but I don't like party games. And that's probably the biggest line is, do I like it or not? But they do have a tendency to have tighter rules and be more structured. They also won't play well, with the exception of Werewolf. They typically won't play well with 15, 20 people.
Right.
And Taboo plays fine with that. Trivial Pursuit could play fine with that. It might get a little hairy, but...
So where would you put something like an Ink and Gold?
That's not a party game to me at all.
But it can play it could play an unlimited number, really.
You really could.
By your pieces and your chips.
Other than the fact that after a while, so in Ink and Gold, think Indiana Jones, you're going to the temple to bring stuff out. The problem with playing with that many people is no one's ever going to collect gems when you split it up every time you find it. They're all going to be left along the path. And now it just becomes, when do I get out so I can collect something? So I don't know that it really could go that large. I see your point. Mm-hmm. There's not a specific, it's not like there's, red, blue, green, and yellow pieces so you can only play 4 players. It's not like that. To me, that would be a large group game, I guess.
Gotcha.
Because it can go up to 8, I think, on the box. Something like that.
Yeah, so I guess maybe, a good thing to talk about is if we look at all of our board game shelves, we have party games on our shelves.
We do.
So there has to be some reason and some circumstance in which we're willing to play, or we think they work well. You know, Brent, you talked about when you and your wife have people over, you know, you tend to pull them out. And even if you don't love them, you play them. So what do we think the circumstances are that we think a party game is worth taking off our shelves and bringing it to the table or, you know, the room? Because often party games aren't played on the table.
I think some of that depends on how much brain power you're willing to put into the game at the time you're playing it.
Or how many bring with them to the house.
Right. Or the people with you in the same kind of circumstance.
Yeah.
Are they willing to actually put the time into learning a rule set, or are you wanting something that's just easy to pull off the shelf and play because you want a social experience?
I've also seen people who you say, oh, we play board games at our house, and they're thinking Monopoly and Life, and they show up and they're like, oh, show me some of the board games, and we're actually sitting amongst my collection right now, and they see some of these games, and they're like, I've never heard of this, and they do one of two things. Few people will say, I want to play the most complicated game you've got. No, you don't. It'll feel like work. Or they say, I'm overwhelmed. I can't. This is more often the case. I probably can't understand these games. Those are a situation when people are walked in, they're overwhelmed. A party game might work better because it's the rules are simpler and they're not in it alone. And the purpose is to laugh a lot of times.
The other place I would put party games is if I'm going to go play a Wii game with people, then a party game will work just as well as playing a Wii game.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's definitely true. And, you know, I think we can get trapped into saying those people who can't play a more complicated game. But, like, when I think about my family, they could probably play a more complicated game. They just don't want to. You know, they just want to hang out and not have to think and just spend time with each other. And so I think kind of in those situations where we would just be sitting around talking anyway, putting a party game in and kind of directing the conversation around that game really kind of helps to really flesh out our time together rather than just sitting there, you know, maybe watching TV or talking about some random stuff. That really kind of gives us a more directed purpose together.
I think that's where it really helps with people who don't know each other. It's because rather than staring at each other because they don't know each other and they don't know how to start the conversation, that it gives you something for the conversation to at least initiate around. So, yeah, I do think that's where the advantage is.
And depending on the party game, when I think of a game like Catchphrase, right, you can either really be engaged or not really be engaged very much and kind of talking to the people around you too. So it kind of allows different levels of participation simply because, you know, you don't have to be hyper-focused. You don't have to learn a bunch of rules. You can just kind of be there, be playing. And so everybody kind of gets to participate at their own level as well.
That's it. Team Trivial Pursuit does that, right?
Yeah.
The person can sit back and be a part of the team, not really contribute until there's a chance they're going to get that one question that they really do know, and then they can participate. And for a lot of people, that's enough. They don't need a lot.
Yeah, I feel like every time I play Trivial Pursuit, it's basically I know one question, and unless we play like Star Wars Trivial Pursuit, I'm all about that.
Yeah.
But any of the classic Trivial Pursuits, I'm not too good at.
Okay, so here's my question. You've got 12 people coming over tonight. What are you going to pull off your shelf, Brent?
I would probably pull off the Logo board game. It's now getting older, so it's not as easy to play, and so people have to at least think a little bit about what they remember from old logos and old brands that are out there.
Yeah, so assuming it's not my super gamer friends, friends
that's
and I,
the assumption.
Yeah. My friends and I turn to we play Mafia a lot. I think part of it is because we really like just killing each other off and, you know, taking out all of our microaggressions on each other.
So Mafia Werewolf, do you play with a printed deck?
No, so
or just with a regular deck of cards?
We just play with a deck of cards, assign the roles to each type of card, and then hand them out.
Huh.
And I typically become the narrator, partly because I feel like I'm hosting, so I feel like I need to be facilitating the game, and partly because, you know, I studied English in college, creative writing, so I think they enjoy the narrations I come up with.
I will say with Werewolf, or Mafia, either one, the narration can make a big difference in the game and how much fun it is. And I'm not particularly good at it. I can get through it mechanically, but I'm not all that good at it. Daniel's good at it, my son, for those of you who are listening. Shane, you'd be good at it. I've seen a couple other people who are really good at it, and I was like, wow, that's a difference.
We also have one friend who we really like to always kill off at the very beginning of the game just because it's
Wow.
it's fun. And she hates us.
For everybody but
a little
her.
bit for us. Yeah, for everybody but her. But she's a very talkative person. We love her. But it's really entertaining to see her not be able to talk too. Sorry for listening. But it's really entertaining to kind of see her reaction to all of that. And then if she's not killed off at the very beginning, then we typically know she's Mafia because, she didn't get killed off. So,
a little metagaming.
It is a little metagaming. But she's also the one that always suggests Mafia. So, she absolutely loves the game. So anytime she gets, halfway through the game, we're pretty sure she's Mafia. And we're usually right about 80% of the time with that too. So for me, 12 people coming over, first of all, giving my wife some therapy, because that's a lot of people for her to have at the house. But typically we pull out Mafia. So what about you, Frank? What would you pull out?
So for me, this is an older game, although it's still out in print. I would pull out Taboo. So you're going around, a person draws a card on their turn. It has the word they're supposed to get everybody to guess, and 5, I believe, words that they cannot use in order to get people to guess the guess word. And they can't use any version of it. So if the taboo word is sing, they can't use sing, singing, sang. They can't use any variation of that word. And if you get them to do it, you get a point, and you keep going. There's a timer. You do as many cards as you can in that timer, and then you pass it to the next person. So, and then you get points off if you use a derivative of a taboo word. Somebody on the other team hits a buzzer, and a point comes off. So the idea is you go around, and part of what I like about this is you can say we're going to do one round of it, and it's over. So it definitely has a solid end game condition. The rules are a little bit tighter. You get people doing all kinds of things from freezing to I pull a word and they're like, I don't know what this word means. And so you get a lot of laughs that way. That would probably be mine. It used to be Balderdash, but I think I like Taboo better.
Yeah, I think another one that comes out a lot is Catchphrase. It's very similar to Taboo, except you can explain it in any way you want. There's no words you can't say, right? And you pass it around the circle. It's kind of like Hot Potato meets Taboo, right? So, there's a timer. When the timer goes off, whoever has it in their hand, their team doesn't get the point, and the other team gets the point.
Okay.
And I think, I find myself also playing that a lot with the teenagers, because it's electronic, so like that's attractive, right, to teenagers to start with. But then too, it's a very quick game. You can pull it out, play for 5 minutes. It doesn't, you don't need an extended amount of time, or even place. I mean, you can play it in the car. So I think that makes it,
so you don't need a board
easy.
per
Yeah.
se.
I think that makes it easy to, play as well. So we've, talked about some party games and why we do and don't like some of them. And for better or worse, our wives are going to keep pulling them off the shelves and having us play them when they have people over. So feel free to tell us what you think about party games, what some of your favorites are. We're going to probably keep them on our shelves, collecting dust, and we'll wipe them off every so often when we have 12 people over, and we want to play a game. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
This has been the Analog Gamers Podcast. You can find us at theanaloggamers.libsyn.com. You can email us at theanaloggamers@gmail.com or find us on Facebook as The Analog Gamers. The Analog Gamers Podcast is licensed under Attribution, No Commercial, Non-Derivative, Creative Commons 3.0 license.